Have you ever wondered what lies behind the perfect facade of a power couple? The lavish parties, the penthouse views, the adoring smiles for the camera. Amelia Sterling thought she had it all. A brilliant career, a loving husband who was a self-made millionaire, and their first child on the way. She was living a dream. But in one night, that dream would curdle into a waking nightmare. Her husband, the man she adored, would not only discard her for his younger, more ambitious mistress, but would do so with a cruelty designed to leave her with absolutely nothing. He thought he was closing a chapter, burying a mistake. He had no idea he was unleashing a force he couldn't possibly comprehend. The city lights of New York glittered below the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Park Avenue penthouse, a sprawling tapestry of diamonds scattered on black velvet. Amelia Sterling traced the rim of her water glass, the condensation cool against her fingertips. The crystal chimed softly as she set it down on the polished mahogany of the dining table, a table set for a celebration that felt increasingly hollow. At 29, she was a successful architect, a partner at a boutique firm, but her greatest project, the one she cherished most, was the life she was building with her husband, Damien Thorne. Damien was a force of nature. At 35, he had built his private equity firm, Thorne Capital Investments, from the ground up, earning a reputation for his ruthless business acumen and devastating charm. They had met at a charity gala 4 years ago, a whirlwind romance that saw them married within a year. He was her rock, her champion, the man who saw the fire in her soul. Or so she had believed. Tonight was supposed to be special. She had cooked his favorite meal, seared scallops, with a lemon butter sauce, followed by a perfectly rare filet mignon. A bottle of sparkling cider was chilling for her, while his favorite bottle of a 1998 Chateau Margaux was breathing on the counter. She had news, the kind of news that transforms a couple into a family. She smoothed a hand over her stomach, where a secret fluttered a life barely the size of a blueberry. The click of the key in the lock finally came at 9:45 p.m. Damien strode in his custom-tailored Tom Ford suit, immaculate, not a single silver blonde hair out of place. He looked like he'd stepped off the cover of Forbes, which ironically he had done 2 months prior. "Sorry I'm late," he said, his voice smooth but distant. He loosened his silk tie, his blue eyes sweeping over the meticulously set table without a flicker of warmth. "Big deal brewing with the Sterling-Nash merger. You know how it is." Of course, Amelia smiled, pushing aside the small prick of disappointment. "Everything is still warm. I was just so excited to talk to you." He kissed her cheek, a perfunctory, dry gesture that felt more like a social obligation than an act of affection. For the past few months, these little chills had been creeping into their marriage. Late nights became all-nighters. Business trips were extended with little explanation. His phone, once left carelessly on the nightstand, was now perpetually in his pocket or face down on his desk. When she tried to touch him, he would often pull away, murmuring about stress or fatigue. She had told herself it was the pressure of his work. He was building an empire, and empires required sacrifice. She had to be the supportive wife, the calm harbor in his turbulent world. "Sit," she urged, her voice bright. "I have something wonderful to tell you." He sat, allowing her to serve him. He ate mechanically, his gaze fixed somewhere over her shoulder, lost in a world of figures and projections she couldn't enter. The silence stretched thick and uncomfortable, so he began finally placing his fork down with a decisive click. "We need to talk." Amelia's heart leaped. "I know me first. She couldn't contain it any longer. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "Damien," she began, her eyes shining with unshed tears of joy. "We're pregnant. I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby." She waited for the explosion of joy, for him to leap up and swing her around, for the cold distance in his eyes to melt away, replaced by the warmth she had fallen in love with. Instead, his face remained a mask of polished stone. He slowly, deliberately removed his hand from under hers. The silence that followed was louder than any shout. It was a void, sucking all the air and light from the room. "Amelia," he said, his voice flat, devoid of any emotion. "That's a complication." The word hit her like a physical blow. "A complication. Damien, it's a baby. Our baby. This is what we've always talked about." "Plans change," he stated, his gaze finally meeting hers. And in their depths, she saw not stress or fatigue, but a chilling reptilian coldness. "I want a divorce." The world tilted on its axis, the glittering city outside blurred into a smear of meaningless lights. "What a divorce? You're joking." "This is a joke." Her laugh was a brittle, broken sound. "I have never been more serious in my life," he said, leaning back in his chair, the picture of detached composure. "I'm in love with someone else." The confession was delivered with the same casual tone he might use to discuss the stock market. Each word was a precision strike designed to inflict maximum damage. "Who?" The question was a raw whisper. "Serafina Dubois. She's an associate in my M&A department. She understands my world, my ambition." He said her name as if it were a rare vintage something precious and refined. Amelia's mind reeled. Serafina, a stunning, fiercely intelligent woman in her mid-20s she'd met at a company Christmas party. Amelia had even commented to Damien how bright she was. The memory was now coated in acid. How long, she asked, her voice trembling. 6 months. 6 months of lies. 6 months of stolen weekends, feigned business trips, and touches that belonged to her. The nausea that rose in her throat had nothing to do with her pregnancy. "You're leaving me, while I'm pregnant with your child. For her." The absurdity, the sheer unadulterated cruelty of it, was incomprehensible. "The pregnancy is unfortunate timing." "I'll admit," he said, a flicker of annoyance crossing his features, "but it doesn't change the facts. This marriage is over. My lawyers will be in touch with you tomorrow. I expect you to be cooperative." "Cooperative?" She choked out a raw, hysterical anger, beginning to burn through the shock. "You want me to be cooperative? You've been cheating on me for half a year, and you're throwing me away like a bad investment." "Don't be so dramatic, Amelia," he sighed, standing up and straightening his tie. It was a gesture of finality, of dismissal. "It's just business, a merger that didn't work out. I'll be staying at the club tonight. I suggest you have your things packed by the end of the week. Serafina will be moving in." He turned to leave, his back straight, his shoulders unburdened by the life he was shattering. "Damien, wait!" she cried, stumbling to her feet. "The baby. This is your child." He paused at the doorway, turning his head slightly. The cold blue of his eyes pinned her in place. "Prove it." He said the words dripping with venom. "As far as I'm concerned, that's your problem now. My lawyers will handle the details of the prenuptial agreement. You'll find it's quite ironclad." And then he was gone. The heavy door clicked shut, sealing the tomb of their marriage. Amelia stood alone in the center of the room, the scent of the uneaten feast mingling with the metallic tang of betrayal. Her hand went to her stomach, a protective, instinctual gesture. She wasn't just losing her husband, her home, her future. He was trying to take her identity, her dignity, and even the legitimacy of their unborn child. The glittering cage had become a prison, and its door had just been slammed shut, leaving her trapped in the ruins of a life she no longer recognized. The fight for her survival and her child's had just begun. The following days bled into a grey, featureless blur of grief and humiliation. The world that had once felt so vibrant and full of promise had been reduced to the sterile, intimidating confines of a lawyer's office. Damien's legal team from the prestigious firm of Gable and Thorne. Legal moved with the swift, merciless efficiency of sharks scenting blood. They were not there to negotiate. They were there to dictate the terms of her surrender. Amelia sat opposite a man named Mr. Peterson, a senior partner with a face like sculpted granite and eyes that held no sympathy. Her own lawyer, a kind but overwhelmed woman named Carol, recommended by a friend, looked increasingly distressed as Peterson laid out the terms. As per the prenuptial agreement signed by Ms. Sterling on June 12, 2021. Peterson droned his voice, a monotonous weapon in the event of a dissolution of the marriage. She is entitled to a one-time payment of $50,000 and is required to vacate any and all properties owned by Mr. Thorne within 7 days of the filing. $50,000? Carol interjected, her voice sharp. That's insulting. They've been married for 4 years. Amelia gave up a promotion at her firm to support Mr. Thorne's social and business obligations. Peterson offered a thin, dismissive smile. A choice she made freely. The document is airtight. Mr. Thorne has also graciously offered to cover her moving expenses up to $2,000. The word graciously hung in the air, a monument to Damien's cruelty. He was worth hundreds of millions. This wasn't a settlement. It was a final slap in the face. And the child Amelia asked, her voice barely a whisper. Her hand rested protectively on her still flat stomach. Peterson adjusted his glasses, his gaze cold. Mr. Thorne contests the paternity. He is willing to submit to a DNA test after the child is born. Until such time, he will make no provisions. If he is proven to be the father, he will fulfill his minimum legal obligations as determined by the state. Nothing more. The public clinical denial of their child was a new, deeper level of pain. It was a calculated move to isolate and shame her. He was painting her as a liar, a gold digger, a woman of questionable morals. The narrative was being written, and she was its villain. The next few days were a frantic, tear-filled scramble. Packaged boxes, once filled with the promise of a shared future, now littered the pristine marble floors of the penthouse. Each object was a memory, a ghost. The vase they bought in Tuscany. The first edition book of poetry he'd given her on their first anniversary. The silver picture frame holding a photo of them on their wedding day, 2 smiling strangers from another lifetime. She packed it all, a curator of her own heartbreak. Her best friend, Chloe Vance, was her savior. A whirlwind of practical energy and righteous fury, Chloe arrived with boxes, packing tape, and a bottle of non-alcoholic wine. The man is a sociopath, Amelia, a genuine grade A monster, Chloe declared expertly, wrapping a set of wine glasses in newspaper, and her Seraphina Dubois. I looked her up. climbed the corporate ladder on her back from what I hear. This isn't love. It's a hostile takeover of your life. Amelia could only nod, her throat thick with unshed tears. The shame was a physical weight pressing down on her chest. The news had already started to leak among their social circle. The whispers followed her like a shadow. "Did you hear about the Thorns?" He left her. Apparently she trapped him with a pregnancy. He's with that brilliant girl from his office now. Damien and Serafina controlled the story, and they were painting her as unhinged and desperate. The final day in the penthouse was the worst. The movers had taken the last of her boxes. The vast apartment echoed with emptiness. As she was about to leave, the elevator doors opened, and Serafina stepped out holding a designer key fob. She was dressed in a sleek white power suit, her dark hair pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. She looked like she belonged there. "Amelia," she said, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. "I was hoping I wouldn't run into you. This must be so difficult." Amelia clutched her purse, her knuckles white. "Get out of my way, Serafina." Serafina's smile was a slash of crimson lipstick. "I just wanted to say I'm truly sorry for your situation. But you can't stand in the way of progress. Damien needs a partner, not a project. He's destined for greatness, and he can't be held back by domestic trivialities." The condescension was breathtaking. Trivialities. "You mean his child?" Serafina waved a dismissive hand, a large diamond flashing on her ring finger, a ring Amelia had never seen before. "Damien has his doubts, and frankly your emotional state right now doesn't exactly inspire confidence. I'll be redecorating, of course. This place is a little dated. Too much soft personal sentiment. It needs a cleaner, more modern aesthetic." It was a final brutal assertion of dominance. Serafina wasn't just taking her husband. She was erasing every trace of her existence. Amelia walked out without another word. Her dignity, the only thing she had left to cling to. She moved into a small one-bedroom apartment in Greenwich Village that Chloe had helped her find. The contrast was jarring. The constant sound of swans replaced the serene quiet of the penthouse. The view was of a brick wall instead of the city skyline. The $50,000 after paying her lawyer and the first few months' rent felt like a pittance, a countdown timer to destitution. She tried to find work, but her focus was shattered. Morning sickness was a constant draining companion. The stress was taking its toll. One afternoon, while scrolling through a financial news site, a headline caught her eye. "Thorn. Capital announces record Q3 profits amid Sterling Nash acquisition." Below the headline was a picture of Damien and Serafina beaming at a press conference. They were the city's new golden couple. He looked happier, more powerful than she had ever seen him. That was when she truly hit rock bottom. Sitting on the floor of her cramped, unfamiliar apartment, surrounded by boxes she had no energy to unpack, Amelia Sterling finally allowed herself to break. The sobs came in racking, gut-wrenching waves for her lost love, for her stolen future, for the innocent child growing inside her, who was already being forced to pay the price for its father's sins. She was alone, pregnant, and on the verge of being penniless in one of the most expensive cities in the world. Damien hadn't just divorced her. He had tried to annihilate her. And as she lay there, the darkness closing in, she felt utterly and completely defeated. There was no way out. There was no hope left. The weeks that followed were a monotonous cycle of survival. Amelia forced herself to eat for the baby's sake, bland crackers and ginger ale, becoming her staples. She unpacked her boxes, turning the small apartment into a semblance of a home, though it felt more like a temporary shelter. Her savings dwindled with alarming speed. She took on freelance architectural drafting projects online, working late into the night, her eyes burning from the screen, just to make enough to cover her bills. The world of galas, charity events, and bespoke suits felt like a dream she'd once had. Her reality was now overdue notices and the constant gnawing anxiety of impending poverty. Chloe remained her steadfast anchor. She'd bring groceries, force Amelia to go for walks in Washington Square Park, and rail against Damien with a ferocity that was both terrifying and comforting. You need to sue him for emotional distress, defamation, something, Chloe insisted one evening over takeout pizza. On what grounds? And with what money? Amelia replied, her voice weary. He has a legal army. I have Carol, who he could bury in paperwork before lunchtime. He's made it clear, Chloe. He wants me gone, and he has the power to make it happen. Her spirit was eroded. The fight had gone out of her. Her focus was singular. Get through the next 9 months, have a healthy baby, and then figure out how to be a single mother with no safety net. It was on a dreary Tuesday in late November, the city air crisp with the promise of a cold winter, that the letter arrived. It was innocuous at first, just another piece of mail in the mountain of bills and junk circulars. But this one was different. The envelope was thick, heavy, cream-colored cardstock with an elegant embossed return address in the corner, Finch and Sterling, Solicitors. 12. Old Square, Lincoln's Inn, London. Finch and Sterling. The name sent a strange, faint hum through her. Sterling was her maiden name. She'd always been told her parents had died in a car crash when she was an infant, leaving her with no known relatives. She was raised in the foster care system until she was adopted by a kind middle-class couple in Connecticut who had since passed away. She had no family. She had no connection to a prestigious London law firm. Her first thought was that it was a mistake. Or perhaps in some bizarre twist, it was from a distant relative of her adoptive parents. With trembling fingers, she slit open the envelope. The letter inside was typed on matching letterhead, the language formal and precise. Dear Miss Amelia Sterling, it is with regret that we must inform you of the passing of your maternal grandfather, Mr. Arthur Kensington, on November 15th. We have been attempting to locate you for some time. As the executor of Mr. Kensington's estate, it is my duty to inform you that you are named as the primary beneficiary in his last will and testament. It is imperative that you contact our offices at your earliest convenience to arrange a meeting either in person in London or via a secure video conference to discuss the details of the estate and the execution of the will. Please accept our sincerest condolences for your loss. Yours faithfully, Alistair Finch, Senior Partner. Finch and Sterling. Amelia read the letter 3 times. The words seemed to swim before her eyes, refusing to make sense. Maternal grandfather, Arthur Kensington. The name meant nothing to her. She had no maternal grandfather. Her mother, according to the scant records she'd seen, was an orphan herself. This had to be a cruel, elaborate prank, or worse, a scam. Yet there was an undeniable weight of authenticity to it. The thick paper, the London address, the formal tone. She quickly searched for Finch and Sterling online. The firm was not just real. It was one of London's oldest and most respected law firms, specializing in estate planning for high net worth individuals for over 2 centuries. Then she typed Arthur Kensington. The results stole her breath. Article after article appeared from publications like the Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, and The Economist. Arthur Kensington wasn't just some wealthy old man. He was a titan. He was the reclusive, legendary founder and chairman of Kensington Global Holdings, a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate with interests in shipping, real estate technology, and pharmaceuticals. He was a kingmaker in global finance, a name whispered with awe and reverence in boardrooms from London to Tokyo. Photographs showed a stern, imposing man with piercing grey eyes and a mane of white hair, even in his old age. And this man was supposedly her grandfather. The world, which had already been turned upside down, once felt like it was dissolving into sheer fantasy. It was impossible. Her life was this small apartment, this dwindling bank account, this unborn child whose father denied its existence. Her life was not multi-billion-dollar conglomerates and London solicitors. She called Chloe immediately, her voice a frantic, breathless mess as she read the letter aloud. Whoa. Slow down, Chloe said. Arthur Kensington. Arthur Kensington. Amelia. This has to be a scam. Someone found your name and is trying to get your personal information. But the law firm is real, Chloe. And they're not asking for my bank details. They're asking for a meeting. And look at the firm's name. Finch and Sterling, my maiden name. A silence fell on the other end of the line. Okay, Chloe said slowly. That is weird. Really weird. What do I do? You proceed with extreme caution. Chloe advised, her lawyerly instincts kicking in. Do not give them any personal information. No social security number. No bank accounts. Nothing. Set up the video conference. Let them talk. I'll be right there with you on mute, listening to every word. If it's a scam, we'll shut it down. But Amelia, what if it's real? If this is actually real? Everything is about to change. Amelia ended the call, her heart hammering against her ribs. She looked around her small apartment at the peeling paint on the windowsill and the worn-out thrift store armchair. She then looked back at the letter, at the name Arthur Kensington, and the vast, dizzying chasm between those two realities. For the first time in months, a feeling other than grief or fear barked within her. It was a terrifying, fragile flicker of something she hadn't felt since Damien walked out that door. Hope. It was a dangerous, seductive feeling, but she couldn't help but cling to it. With nothing left to lose, she took a deep breath and drafted an email to Mr. Pessimist, Alistair Finch, a single keystroke that would either expose a cruel hoax or unlock a past she never knew she had. The video conference was scheduled for 2 days later. Amelia set up her laptop on the small dining table, her hands slick with nervous perspiration. Chloe sat beside her, a legal pad in her lap, and a skeptical expression on her face. The screen flickered to life, revealing a man who perfectly matched the gravitas of his firm's letterhead. Alistair Finch appeared to be in his late 60s, with kind, discerning eyes behind a pair of silver-rimmed spectacles and a neatly trimmed gorse-grey beard. He sat in what was clearly a wood-panelled office with leather-bound books lining the walls behind him. Miss Sterling, thank you for making the time to speak with me. He began, his voice a calm, cultured baritone that carried the weight of English authority. I am Alistair Finch, and please allow me again to offer my condolences on the passing of your grandfather, Mr. Finch. Amelia started, her voice steadier than she expected. I appreciate you reaching out. But I have to be honest. I believe there has been a mistake. My parents died when I was a baby. I was raised in the foster system. I have no known family, certainly not a grandfather named Arthur Kensington. Mr. Finch listened patiently, his hands steepled on the desk before him. When she finished, he gave a sad, knowing nod. "There has been no mistake, Miss Sterling," he said gently. "The story you were told was incomplete. It was a fabrication designed to protect you." He then began to unravel the story of her life, a story so profoundly different from the one she knew that it felt like he was describing a stranger. Her mother was not an orphan. Her name was Elizabeth Sterling, and she was Arthur Kensington's only child, his beloved daughter. "Your mother was a brilliant, free-spirited woman," Finch explained, his expression softening with memory. "But she was also headstrong. She fell in love with the man your grandfather deeply disapproved of, an American journalist, a war correspondent named Semtu Menfa David. Arthur saw him as a reckless fortune hunter, unworthy of his daughter and the Kensington legacy. He painted a picture of a classic family feud, an immovable, powerful patriarch, and a daughter determined to choose love over duty. Elizabeth and David eloped and moved to the United States, severing all ties with Arthur. For years he heard nothing, his pride and anger creating a chasm between them. Then, a little over 28 years ago, he received a letter from your father." Finch continued. "Elizabeth had given birth to a daughter, you. David wrote to Arthur, hoping the birth of his grandchild would thaw his heart and lead to a reconciliation. But Arthur, in his stubbornness, never replied. A few months later, tragedy struck. Elizabeth and David were covering a story in a conflict zone in South America when they were caught in the crossfire. They were killed instantly. Amelia felt a wave of dizziness. This wasn't a car crash. Her parents were heroes journalists who died in the line of duty. Arthur was devastated, Finch said, his voice dropping. The guilt consumed him. He had lost his only child because of his pride. He immediately flew to the States to find you, his only living connection to his daughter. But when he arrived, you were gone. The local authorities, seeing no next of kin, had already placed you into the state's foster care system, and due to privacy laws and sealed records, even with all his wealth and influence, he hit a wall. You had vanished. For years, Arthur Kensington had employed the best private investigators in the world to find his lost granddaughter. It became his life's obsession. He built his global empire, but it was a hollow kingdom without his heir. It was only 3 years ago that an investigator finally had a breakthrough, tracing a sealed adoption record to a couple in Connecticut, and from there to an architect in New York named Amelia Sterling. He wanted to contact you immediately, Finch said. But he saw you were married, seemingly happy and successful. He was an old man filled with regret. He feared that his sudden appearance would disrupt your life, that you would hate him for the years of silence. He chose to watch you from a distance, gathering every piece of news about you he could. He was immensely proud of your career, of the woman you had become. Tears were streaming freely down Amelia's face now. Chloe reached over and squeezed her hand, her own eyes wide with shock. In his final years, his health failing, he amended his will, Finch concluded. He left everything to you. He saw it not as a gift, but as a long overdue apology. His legacy, he wrote in a letter he left for you, was not his company, but his daughter's child. Finch held up a document to the camera. Ms. Sterling, as the sole heir of Arthur Kensington, you are the new majority shareholder and controlling owner of Kensington Global Holdings and all its subsidiary assets. The company is currently valued conservatively at approximately $47 billion. The number was so astronomical, so utterly beyond the realm of comprehension, that Amelia almost laughed. $47 billion. Just last week, she had been agonizing over a $300 electricity bill. Chloe let out a low whistle beside her. There are, of course, extensive properties trusts and personal effects, Finch added, as if this were an afterthought. A manor in the English countryside, a villa in Lake Como, a collection of modern art. The list is quite extensive. The reality of it began to sink in a seismic shock that rearranged her entire understanding of who she was. She wasn't an orphan. She was a Kensington. She came from a line of immense power and wealth. The loneliness that had been a constant companion her entire life was suddenly replaced by the ghost of a family she never knew she had. I don't know what to say, Amelia stammered, wiping her eyes. There is nothing you need to say right now, my dear Finch said, his tone paternal. This is a great deal to process. We have a team ready to assist you with everything from the legal transition to simply answering your questions. The first step would be for you to come to London to sign the necessary documents and formally assume your position. The call ended a few minutes later, with promises to arrange travel and further correspondence. Amelia closed the laptop, and the tiny apartment fell silent. Chloe finally broke the silence. Okay. So, you're basically a princess. Amelia shook her head, a dazed, watery smile on her face. I don't even know what I am. Then a new feeling began to crystallize through the shock and grief. It was a cold, hard resolve. She thought of Damien and his petty $50,000 settlement. She thought of Serafina, redecorating her home, erasing her. She thought of their smug faces in the news, celebrating a victory built on her destruction. They thought they had crushed Amelia Sterling, the struggling architect from a humble background. They had no idea who she really was. Damien had called their unborn child a complication and a problem. He had dismissed her as a liability. But now she was not a liability. She was a Kensington. And this child, his child, was the heir to a fortune that dwarfed his own 1,000 times over. He had wanted to erase her. But she was about to become the one thing he could never ignore. The power had shifted. The game had changed, and Amelia Sterling was just beginning to understand the rules. The flight to London was a surreal dream. Amelia flew first class on a British Airways flight, a ticket arranged by Mr. Finch's office. She spent the 7-hour journey in a state of suspended disbelief, the gentle hum of the engines a backdrop to the tectonic plates shifting in her life. She was no longer Amelia the discarded wife. She was Amelia Sterling Kensington, the heiress to a global empire. The name felt foreign on her tongue, a costume she had yet to grow into. London was grey and majestic. A black Bentley was waiting for her at Heathrow, the driver holding a discreet sign with her name. He whisked her away to the Connaught in Mayfair, where a suite, not a room, an entire suite larger than her Greenwich Village apartment, had been prepared for her. It was a world of hushed luxury, of impeccable service and quiet deference. It was the world she was born into, and the one she was now belatedly claiming. The next day she met Alistair Finch at the historic offices of Finch and Sterling. He guided her through a labyrinth of legal documents, each signature another step into her new reality. She was now the chairwoman of Kensington Global Holdings. The board of directors, a collection of grizzled, powerful men who had been loyal to her grandfather for decades, was awaiting her instruction. They will be skeptical at first. Finch warned her gently over tea in his office after the signings were complete. You are young, you are a woman, and you are an unknown quantity. They will test you. Let them, Amelia said, a newfound steel in her voice. The shy, heartbroken woman who had fled New York seemed a lifetime away. Grief and shock had been alchemized into a cold, diamond-hard purpose. My grandfather built an empire. I will not be the one to let it crumble. For the next 2 months, Amelia immersed herself in a brutal, self-imposed crash course. She lived and breathed Kensington Global Holdings. She devoured decades of financial reports, market analyses, and strategic plans. She met with every department head, from the grizzled chief of their shipping division to the wunderkind CEO of their new tech venture fund. She didn't pretend to be an expert. She listened, she learned, and she asked sharp, insightful questions that betrayed her architect's mind, a mind trained to see structure, weakness, and potential in complex systems. Slowly she won their respect. They saw not a flighty heiress, but a focused, intelligent, and fiercely determined leader. She wasn't her grandfather. She was quieter, more collaborative, but she possessed his iron will. She also began to quietly assemble her own personal team. She hired a formidable new CFO, a woman named Genevieve Croft, known for her aggressive and brilliant financial strategies. She put a top-tier corporate security firm on retainer, and she established a new private investment vehicle, a subsidiary holding company in Delaware, registered under the anonymous name AS Holdings. No one knew what it was for, but no one dared to question her. As her belly swelled with the growing life inside her, so did her power and confidence. The city of London, initially intimidating, began to feel like home. She moved into her grandfather's sprawling countryside manor in the Cotswolds, a place of quiet beauty and history. It was there, in a beautiful room overlooking a garden that had been tended for centuries, that she gave birth to a healthy, beautiful baby girl. She named her Lily Elizabeth Kensington. Holding her daughter for the first time, Amelia felt the last vestiges of the old, her fall away. This tiny, perfect creature was everything. She was the reason for this fight. She was the future of the Kensington legacy. The thought of Damien, who had so callously denied this child, filled her not with sadness but with a glacial rage. While she was on a brief maternity leave, she stayed connected, running the empire from the manor. One afternoon, while reviewing market intelligence reports with Genevieve Croft via video call, a familiar name appeared: Thorn Capital Investments. They're overextended, Genevieve noted, pointing to a series of charts on the screen. Damien Thorn made a massive, highly leveraged play for the Sterling-Nash merger. He staked the company's future on it. It paid off in the short term, but it's left his firm vulnerable. His debt-to-equity ratio is precarious. A significant dip in the market, or a failure in one of his other key investments, could trigger a cascade. Amelia leaned closer to the screen, her heart beating a little faster. What kind of failure? Genevieve's smile was sharp. Thorn Capital is the primary backer for a major new biotech firm, Innovate Gen Pharmaceuticals. They've poured hundreds of millions into it. Innovate Gen's entire valuation is based on the upcoming FDA approval of a new Alzheimer's drug, Serafrin 9. If that drug fails its Phase 3 trials, Innovate Gen will be worthless overnight. Thorn Capital's stock would plummet. They'd be ripe for a hostile takeover. Amelia looked at Genevieve, a silent understanding passing between them. Kensington's pharmaceutical division, Amelia said slowly. Our R&D is second to none. Do we have anything that competes with Seraphin 9? Genevieve's smile widened. Funny you should ask. We have a drug called Cognisil. Superior efficacy, fewer side effects. We fast-tracked the trials 6 months ago on your grandfather's last directive. The final results are due any day now. If we get approval first and push it to market, we could make Seraphin 9 completely obsolete before it even launches. The pieces clicked into place. The path forward was suddenly brutally clear. This wasn't just about the market anymore. This was about justice. Genevieve Amelia said, her voice calm and steady. I want you to use AS Holdings. Start quietly acquiring Thorn Capital's debt. Buy it from their lenders. Become their primary creditor. And pull every string we have at the FDA. I want Cognisil's approval expedited. Every resource of Kensington Global is to be focused on this. Consider it done, Genevieve replied, a glint in her eye. She knew this wasn't just business. Amelia ended the call and walked over to the bassinet where Lily was sleeping peacefully. She gently stroked her daughter's soft cheek. He thought we were a complication, she whispered. He thought he could throw us away and forget we ever existed. But we're going to be the foundation of his ruin. He built his empire on ruthlessness. I'll build ours on the ashes of his. The phoenix had risen, and now it was ready to hunt. The next 3 months were a masterclass in corporate warfare, orchestrated with the precision of a seasoned general. From her command center in London, Amelia directed the multi-pronged assault on Damien Thorne's empire. It was a silent, invisible attack, a web being woven around him that he couldn't see until it was too late. Step 1 was the pharmaceutical play. Kensington's lobbying power in Washington, combined with Cognisil's legitimately superior trial data, worked wonders. The FDA granted approval with a speed that made headlines in the medical world. The day Kensington Global announced the immediate market release of Cognisil shares in InnovateGen Pharmaceuticals plummeted by 70%. Damien's flagship investment was suddenly toxic. Step 2 was the debt. AS Holdings, Amelia's anonymous shell corporation, had spent weeks buying up Thorn Capital's debt from various investment banks. The banks were happy to offload the risk, especially with the InnovateGen news rattling the market. In the span of a month, Amelia's holding company became the single largest creditor to her ex-husband's firm. She owned him. Step 3 was the market pressure. Using Kensington's vast financial resources, Genevieve Croft initiated a series of strategic short sells against Thorn Capital's stock. Rumors expertly planted in key financial news outlets began to circulate about the firm's instability and over-leveraged position. The stock, already weakened, began to hemorrhage value. In his New York office, Damien Thorne was in a state of escalating panic. His world was kalapungho. The Sterling Nash merger, once his crowning achievement, was now an anchor dragging him under. His lenders were calling, demanding more collateral. His investors were fleeing. He worked around the clock, his famous charm curdling into raw, desperate anger. He lashed out at his staff, at his partners, and most of all, at Serafina. "This is your fault," he snarled at her one night, throwing a crystal glass against the wall of the penthouse she had so proudly redecorated. "You were supposed to be my partner, the brilliant mind. You told me the InnovateGen play was a sure thing. How could I have known Kensington would come out of nowhere with a miracle drug?" She shot back, her composure finally cracking under the strain. This isn't my fault, Damien. This is your ego. You bet the entire company on one roll of the dice. Their dream life was imploding. The lavish parties stopped. The fawning press fell silent. The foundation of their relationship, power, success, and money was crumbling, revealing the ugly transactional reality beneath. The final blow came on a crisp spring morning. Damien was in an emergency board meeting trying to stave off a mutiny when his secretary burst in, her face pale. "So you need to see this. It's on every financial network." The television screen showed the breaking news banner. Mysterious AS Holdings initiates hostile takeover of Thorn Capital. Damien stared dumbfounded. "Who the hell is AS Holdings?" he roared. No one knew. They were a ghost, a phantom entity that had seemingly appeared from nowhere to devour his company. A few hours later, the answer arrived in the form of a legal summons. AS Holdings was calling in its debt, all of it, immediately. Failure to pay would result in the forfeiture of the company's controlling shares, which had been pledged as collateral. It was a checkmate. Thorn Capital was finished. The summons requested a meeting with the principal of AS Holdings to negotiate the terms of the surrender. Damien, a broken and defeated man, agreed. He had to know who had so masterfully destroyed him. He walked into the designated boardroom at the offices of a neutral law firm, expecting to see a rival he knew, Victor Beaumont, of Beaumont Industries, or some other corporate raider. Instead, the room was empty except for a single woman standing by the window, looking out over the city. She was impeccably dressed in a dark blue Armani power suit, her blonde hair cut in a chic, sophisticated bob. She looked poised, confident, and powerful. When she turned around, Damien's blood ran cold. It was Amelia. But it wasn't the Amelia he knew. The soft, loving woman he had discarded was gone. In her place stood a queen, her eyes holding not a trace of love or pain, only the chill of absolute victory. "Amelia," he whispered, his voice cracking. What is this? What are you doing here, negotiating the terms of your surrender?" she said, her voice even and cool. She gestured to the folder on the table. AS Holdings. As in Amelia Sterling. It's my company. Or rather, one of them. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He staggered back, grabbing the back of a chair for support. "You. How the money?" "Where did you get the money?" "You never once asked about my family. Did you, Damien?" she said, a faint, mirthless smile playing on her lips. "In all our years together, you were so consumed with your own story, your own rise, that you never bothered to learn mine. You just assumed I was no one, that I came from nothing." She let the silence hang in the air before delivering the final devastating truth. "My name is Amelia Sterling Kensington. My grandfather was Arthur Kensington. You didn't divorce a struggling architect. You divorced the sole heir to Kensington Global Holdings." Damien's face went ashen. The scale of his miscalculation was so immense, so cosmically catastrophic, that his mind couldn't process it. He had thrown away a queen, a woman who held more power and wealth in her little finger than he had ever dreamed of, all for an associate. And about that complication you were so eager to get rid of. Amelia continued, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. "I had a daughter. Her name is Lily Elizabeth Kensington. As my only child, she is the heir to a $47 billion fortune. You demanded a paternity test. I've had one done. Here are the results." She slid a document across the table. It confirmed with 99.99% certainty that Damien Thorne was the father. "You will never see her," Amelia stated, her voice like ice. "You will never have a claim to her or her inheritance. You abandoned her. You denied her. You have forfeited the right to be her father. This," she gestured around the room, symbolizing his ruined company, "is your only legacy. Failure." Damien finally crumbled, slumping into a chair, his head in his hands. He was utterly, comprehensively ruined. He had lost his company, his reputation, his wealth, and the chance to know the child who was heiress to one of the world's greatest fortunes. He had traded it all for a fleeting affair and his own hubris. As Amelia turned to leave, her victory complete, the door opened and Serafina rushed in. "Damien! What's happening? Who is—" She stopped dead when she saw Amelia. Amelia paused and looked at the woman who had helped destroy her life. She saw the fear and confusion in Serafina's eyes. She could have said 1,000 things, gloated, savored the moment. Instead, she offered only a single dismissive glance. "He's all yours now," Amelia said, her voice indifferent. And with that, she walked out of the room, leaving the architects of her misery to drown in the wreckage they had created. In the aftermath of the takeover, the name Thorne Capital Investments was erased from the financial landscape of New York. Amelia, through AS Holdings, absorbed its viable assets, folded them into the Kensington portfolio, and liquidated the rest. Damien Thorne was left with nothing but a mountain of personal debt and a reputation so toxic he would never work in finance again. The last Amelia heard, he and Serafina had separated acrimoniously, blaming each other for their downfall. He had reportedly been seen working as a consultant for a small, obscure firm in the Midwest, a king reduced to a pawn. But for Amelia, the victory was not the end of the story. It was the beginning. Revenge had been a powerful motivator, a fire that had forged her into the leader she needed to become. But she knew that fire, if left to burn, would consume her too. Her purpose was no longer defined by Damien's betrayal, but by her daughter's future. She returned to London, not as a vengeful ex-wife, but as the confident and visionary chairwoman of Kensington Global Holdings. She proved to be a natural leader, blending her grandfather's fierce business instincts with a modern, more compassionate approach. She invested heavily in sustainable technologies and ethical business practices, steering the corporate behemoth in a new direction. She established the Elizabeth Sterling Foundation, a massive global charity dedicated to funding education for underprivileged children and protecting journalists in conflict zones, a tribute to the parents she never knew. Her life was full. She split her time between the bustling energy of London and the serene peace of the Cotswolds Manor. Her days were a whirlwind of board meetings, strategic planning, and philanthropic work. But her evenings were reserved for Lily. She would leave the empire at the door and become just a mother, reading bedtime stories, kissing scraped knees, and watching her daughter grow with a heart full of overwhelming love. One afternoon, while overseeing the early stages of a new project, the construction of a state-of-the-art, eco-friendly pediatric hospital in London, she found herself collaborating with a renowned architectural firm. The lead on the project was a man named Victor Beaumont. He was handsome, intelligent, and possessed a quiet integrity that was the antithesis of Damien's flashy charisma. He had been one of Damien's chief rivals, a man who built his company on innovation rather than ruthless acquisition. He approached her as they reviewed blueprints, his eyes filled with genuine admiration. "What you've done with Kensington is remarkable, Miss Kensington," he said. "You've not only honored your grandfather's legacy, you've made it your own. You've given it a conscience." Amelia smiled, a real unguarded smile. "Please call me Amelia. And thank you, Victor. I'm just trying to build something that will last." "I have no doubt you will," he said. "Foundations are everything, and yours is clearly made of something stronger than steel." As she looked at him, and then at the plans for the hospital that would save the lives of countless children, she realized he was right. She had once been the architect of a small life, a life built on the flawed foundation of Damien's love. When he had ripped it all away, she had fallen into ruin. But from those ruins, she had built something far grander. She had built an empire, a legacy, a charity, and a family. She was no longer defined by the man who had tried to destroy her, nor solely by the grandfather who had saved her. She was Amelia Sterling Kensington, a mother, a leader, a philanthropist. She was the architect of her own life, and this time the foundation was unbreakable. Her past was a story of betrayal and loss, but her future was a blueprint of her own design, a magnificent structure built not on revenge, but on resilience, love, and a strength she had discovered deep within herself. She was finally, truly free. What an incredible journey of resilience and empowerment. From the depth of a devastating betrayal to the pinnacle of global power, Amelia's story is a powerful reminder that our circumstances do not define us. It's about how we rise from the ashes, how we reclaim our narrative, and how we can build a new, stronger foundation from the wreckage of the past. She transformed her pain into purpose, not only achieving justice but also creating a better world for her daughter and countless others. Her story proves that the ultimate revenge isn't destruction, but building a life so magnificent that those who wronged you become an insignificant footnote. If Amelia's story of strength and triumph resonated with you, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next real-life drama. And we want to hear from you. What would you have done if you were in Amelia's shoes? Let us know in the comments below.